Good morning, I'm Robert Hoffman, and welcome to the first Wednesday morning roundtable program of the 2021 sessions. To those that have joined our membership, we so appreciate your support. Although this content is currently free and accessible to the public, if you haven't joined the roundtable, we encourage you to do so. Please visit auburndowntown.org and click on WMR. This Downtown Auburn BID program is brought to you by Tompkins Trust Company. The topic is education with special guests Jeff Pirozzolo and Neil O'Brien, and the moderator today is Guy Cosentino. Guy is the Executive Director of Cayuga Community College Foundation. Guy, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first Wednesday morning roundtable of the 2021 season. We'll have some bookkeeping items at the end of the program about what's coming up and how you can participate. But we had, oddly enough, decided months ago, in the middle of the kickoff of what has become the worldwide pandemic, to get two perspectives on the new start of a new school year, thinking that everything would be easy and smooth by then. But we were wrong. And we have two different districts who are approaching opening up a little differently. And so we decided to go with both the largest school district in the city, or excuse me, in the county, as well as a rural district who have different needs and different sizes. Many of you know that the school districts in question, Port Barn has a student population, I think, of about 800 overall. Auburn has about 4,000, so there's a little bit of disparity there. Busing is an issue for both districts as well, and transportation. Port Barn has a graduation rate of these are 2 years ago numbers, about 88%. Auburn 72, the state average is 83 according to the state website. And so back in August, on the 7th of August, the governor decided that we could go to in-room, in-person instruction, and that threw all the districts into how do you make sure that occurs when the governor may not have given it. And this is my editorial, not the districts. I'm not funded by the governor. If they didn't give you a whole lot of direction about what could be going on. And as we tape this, it oddly happens to be September 10th. So you're watching this about 7 days later. As we have learned, even as late as yesterday, regulations change. We know football has changed in spring sports and fall sports, and there's most likely going to be other breaking items that will occur between now and next Wednesday when you watch this. And so we just want to make sure you're aware of that point in time. So our presenters are Neil O'Brien, who joined Port Barn Central Schools as their superintendent in August of 2004. He has a degree in economics from St. John Fisher, worked at Xerox. Prior to his being with the district as their superintendent, he was a teacher. I think he is the longest serving superintendent in Cayuga County right now, but I'm not 100% sure. I did watch the BOCES video yesterday, and it does look like you are the most senior of the group, and I say that nicely. He was the former head of the New York State Council of School Superintendents, and he announced in the last year that he will be retiring in December of 2021. Jeff Pirozzolo, who has presented also to the Wednesday morning roundtable before, is with the Auburn School District. He officially took over in 2015, so he's in his 5th year with the district, a little over that. He started with the Auburn District in 2005 as the principal of what was then vice principal of what was then West Middle School, and in 2007 was promoted to the assistant superintendent for personnel for the district. And not that these two guys can't be connected more. Superintendent Pirozzolo's wife, Tracy, works for Neil O'Brien in the Port Barn District as a school counselor. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for taking the time. I know this is a busy week as Port Barn goes back into the classroom live. And I know today, as we take this on Thursday, because I saw it in my dining room this morning, the Auburn School District is going virtual this morning with elementary school. So we've asked you both on to talk about where you are in your planning, what you see as the outlook of elementary and secondary education in a COVID-19 world, especially in Cayuga County. And by a lot or draw, we said we would start with Neil O'Brien. So O'Brien, welcome.
3 days last week. And today we have K-12 in the building. So we've been building up. We started off on Tuesday with about half the grades in the building, and now we're up to everybody but UPK, and very excited. And what has transpired here is quite unique, because besides being able to have all the students here every day, we also have what we call a pod system, which is something that is not, I don't know anybody else in Central New York doing it. It comes out of CDC guidelines that says best practices, and that is not to have students mixed during the day. Have as little contact between people as possible. And so the students come to school every day, either by bus or by car, a lot by car. We begged our parents in July and early August to switch over to drive their students here so we could get to the mark of having everybody here. We could possibly do it by busing, the regulations. And so they come, and they actually come right up to the curb and drop their kids off and pick them up at the curb. They do not get out of the car. The kids have masks. They come into the building and they go straight to their classroom, and they never leave the classroom. They're there from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock. They have breakfast. We feed all of our kids. So the lunches and breakfasts are served right inside their classroom. And their classroom is sort of a combination of a technology center and a learning center. And so, for instance, at 9 o'clock in the morning, if Global Studies 10 is being taught in the building, that teacher can only be in one of the pods, one of the rooms to teach with 12 students, but she might have 55 students taking Global Study 10 this year. So all the other Global 10 students are taking the class with her, but they're using electronics. They're sitting in a classroom with a large Promethean board and watching her and watching the lesson online. And what she does throughout the week is try to move around. So at least one day every week, she's in each one of the pods that has 10th grade Global Studies. And so we're kind of combining technology of the online system and also in person, hopefully getting to the point where the virus does not go through the building. We can stay in a long, long time. That's the dream and hope in all of this. And it really came about, lots of pieces of the puzzle here. I always do this in public all the time. I always compare myself to Joe Torre, because a lot of people give us a lot of credit for what we're doing and give us some accolades. And Joe Torre's response back in the 1990s was, I think it has more to do with Jeter and Williams and Rivera and so forth. And I'm just blessed at this time. I have a great staff and a great leadership team. Really worked hard over the last about 5-6 years to get to this point. And the reason is that about 6 years ago, I went to New York City to visit Carmen Farina, who was then Chancellor of New York City Schools. And while I was there, I got to see one of the schools that was using technology in a very unique way on one-on-one. And I got so excited because I could see the future. I knew that somewhere down the line in 21st century learning was going to be quite different than what I grew up and what we were doing at the time. And so I brought a team of teachers in New York City, which was fun, bring a whole group of Fort Byron teachers on planes and go fly down there and walk around the school. And they got excited too. So we actually started online learning in the fall of 2015. And so one of the things that makes it possible for us this fall is that we've been doing online learning of one form or another since 2015. So even last March, when we went out, our school district was able to go right online with every student having a device and go right into going in a very successful way in the beginning, because we had a 5-year lead time to get to that point. So when we got to the end of this last spring and we looked at how our online learning was doing, we looked at student assessments. We gave every student assessment who had been doing online student learning with us last spring, try to gauge, are we successful? It's one thing to say, hey, there's the kids in front of the computers. Are they learning anything? And how well are they learning? Can you benchmark it against traditional instruction? So if you take a math test in the end of May and measure how the students would have done if they had been in session last spring, the year before, and try to measure the two out. And we got a lot of good data, some not so great data, but we got some good data. And from that, we were able to take a look at how we might be able to take the online system and move it forward into the pod system over the summer. So, you know, basically for us, because of size, the difference in Auburn and Fort Byron, we have 800 students. We're blessed with declining enrollment. So how's that a blessing? Well, our facility is very large. It was built for a much larger student population. And so we have elbow room here. And so when they said you can only have 12 to 15 students per classroom, that also wasn't an impediment for us, because we actually have enough elbow room to be able to do it. So you know, the combination of technology and the combination of space gave us an opportunity to go forward. And then we've had a lot of support as we went along the way here. Right now, I only have one staff member who took a year's leave of absence. Every other staff member is here with me. They are both teaching online the kids who are at home. I have 180 students who are not here, they're at home, and I have the remaining students here. And so during the day, they teach one class at a global studies teacher. She's teaching that one class at 9 o'clock. We give her time during the day also then to pivot and to support the kids who are going home and learning from the home. She also records that lesson at 9 o'clock in the morning. So during those kids are at home, they do the lesson on a tape version. And so she's able to then work both with the home students who are home, online learning, and also students in the building. So far, again, day 3. As Guy said at the beginning, bravely concerned that what I say today will not be true a week from today because it is moving rapidly every day. But so far, in the last 3 days, we've been able to get successfully there. Our biggest impediments was trying to have roughly about 220 cars drop off and pick their kids up every day. We did block Route 31 one day, so slowed down the traffic in Cayuga County. We knew that might happen, but we've been working really hard. Today, this morning was perfect. We were able to get all the students in here on time, and I don't think any one of the parents' wait times in the car was more than about 4 minutes. You got to remember that what makes it remarkable is you think of school. I got to get a kindergarten child without their parents' help. I have to get them out of the car in their car seat, and these are kindergarten kids who have not been to school since last March as UPK students. They're used to coming in a bus. So I have to have staff members who are strangers to them at times come into their cars and pull them out of their car seat, make them feel comfortable to come into a building and start anew. So it's a little slow in the beginning, but it's been remarkable on how great the staff has been and how wonderful they've been through the process. Getting us up and running. Just a couple other highlights to it as we go forward is that we're looking at trying to move in the point where we can go throughout the entire year. I don't know what's going to transpire, but the thing about our system is that as they're building the capacity to do these online lessons, we're also looking backwards and forwards at the same time, because if we should go out fully online again, we're actually a nice like a folding system. We can, since they all have devices anyway, and we're building this constant capacity. If that magic moment ever happens and they say, hey, you got to get pulled out and start and be at home the whole time, we're actually very flexible in the nature we can do that. I mean, there was a memo from New York State yesterday saying, what if we had online snow days, which will take all the thrill of watching TV in the morning. And what the state is doing on an experimental basis is there's a foot of snow forecasted for Cayuga County some night. We could just switch to online and declare a snow day and have them go online learning. So the beauty of our system right now is that if you told me tomorrow we couldn't come into session, okay, tomorrow we'll be completely online, and we can do that very quickly and very nimble. If we get shut down for 2 to 3 days and get pulled back in, again, we'll constantly be able to go back and forth with relative ease, because much of learning is online when they are here. So the technology allows you to go back and forward. But that's the crux of our system. But again, size plays a large role, and just going to have a very different model because of size and so forth. And the good fortune that, when we did start this 5-6 years ago, we've been building capacity over the years. Our staff has been working with online learning. The students have had a one-on-one advice for several years. And so all the things that were novel to a lot of school districts or struggles from the get-go, we were fortunate because we already had either both the structure in place, we had the professional development, we had the staff who were used to using the technology. And so when you had to change the process and go forward, you didn't have that huge mountain to climb. We had a small hill to climb, not a mountain to climb. And that made a big difference. We were fortunate back in March, we kind of saw it coming a little bit. So we actually met on March 1st and predicted. I can't do sports betting, so please do not watch me and say I have great field here. But we predicted March 13th was the last day of school. We were doing our modeling. So that previous week, we were actually working with, we had the kids clean out their lockers on that Friday to a large extent, figuring that was going to be the last weekend. We didn't know we were going to be out all day. I thought it would be a shorter duration, but we were actually moving in that direction. So, capacity-wise has been there all along. I think the hardest part now is trying to keep it very novel and exciting for kids. So today we have the honeymoon. This week we have the honeymoon. But the great thing about learning is when learning occurs in lots of different modalities, lots of different teaching styles. And I fear that the way we're doing it is going to be the same every day. And they are adolescent kids. And if you do the same thing over and over every day, you're going to lose their enthusiasm to learn. So I think that's the other challenge for us. If we're blessed to going forward for 2 more months on this type model here, how can we make it so it's novel? How can we bring excitement to the students? How can we make every day a positive for them to be here? Because, you can't never forget this, they're not mixing. And so there's no cafeteria time, there's no hallway time, there's no finding a boyfriend and girlfriend because they're not talking to anybody. Take all the things you know about school, things that you remember, some things you kind of don't want to remember about your school days, and we've completely removed those. It is purely about learning. And you can say, well, it's in its purest form, but schools have also been known as a great social center. And American history and American culture, we look at schools very differently than just a learning center. And so, I want the students' attendance to be great here. So that's also, we have to be extremely mindful of what do you do to make it exciting and novel every day. And it doesn't get into feeling like that they're Dilbert inside of a cubicle for 6 hours doing Dilbert's work. They'll have plenty of years to do that as adults. We don't want to do that as children to them too. So I think that's the struggle for all of us collectively is we've got this model that we're pretty proud of, but how do we make the model always be organic and dynamic enough so it meets the needs of kids today, but also will continue down the road. And so right now there's a meeting going on upstairs right now, and basically the thrust of it is what other applications can we find with technology in this type of limited world here. We're excited, very nervous. I get up early in the morning and I come here and I have no idea what to expect. I could get that phone call from Kathleen Cuddy anytime during the daytime. I love her to death, but I saw it on the speed dial that Kathleen Cuddy from the Department of Health is calling me. I shudder. Kathleen's going to watch this phone call. I shudder when I get my name, but that one phone call change your world in a millisecond. So you have to get ready for it. But that's, you kind of live on the edge every day. We're wondering if today's the day that you're going to get that phone call overnight. Are you ready for it? What does that mean? We've never done this before. It's all new. My last year is my most exciting year, which is not what I intended to do in life. So.
Do you wish you had left earlier?
No. Actually, to be honest with you, as a 17-year career, and being honest, you would say to yourself, yeah, some of it got a little rote over time when you're doing the same thing 17 years. In some ways, it's been nerve-wracking, but it's also exciting because it's like doing it all. It's doing differently, and so it's been an energy drainer, but also an energy builder too. To build something new in your last year is also exciting. And in a remark about this before in different contexts, but you always use that Joe Torre thing that. I got the best team in the world right now, like he was a manager in the 1990s, and, they're excited. Just think of my attendance for my staff. I mean, just think of a school district right now that we report over one teacher on one. I have everybody here. I have my entire staff here. And so the enthusiasm and excitement they have for it is infectious. And so I have not had issues. I'll be honest with you. If you came today and were walking around outside watching it, you see a very excited staff to be here. There's been no pushback. Everybody says, well, aren't they angry about this, angry about that? We have a mask policy that kids can take the mask off once they're socially distanced inside the classroom. Again, that is not the prevailing wisdom out there, but in the POS system, it does fit the CDC. And again, I have a staff who's very excited and has been willing to move forward with it too.
Thank you. We'll have some other questions for you in just a minute. We're going to also work on your volume, but we're going to turn over to Jeff Pirozzolo to talk about. Just as a clarification, Mr. O'Brien, you have how many buildings where you have students?
We have 2 buildings. We have the elementary and the high school.
And then Mr. Pirozzolo, you have 7.
Correct.
So we'll turn it over to you. Tell us what Auburn is doing it a little differently. So what is Auburn doing?
Yeah, so we're doing more of a phase in like New York State did, a phase into reopening. That's sort of the approach that we're taking as well. And one of the reasons why is, again, we have 600 employees. So, you know, bringing 600 people back into our buildings that haven't been in since March 13th, that was quite a process in its own. You know, some of the behavioral changes that we have to occur with wearing face masks and socially distancing, the screening procedures. You know, these are things that we're still trying to get great at. And really, we have to be the role models for our students. So, you know, it is a change that we're all going through, but we're doing it. And, you know, there was many factors that led up to the discussion or to the decision to do the phase in. And one again is we had almost 1,000 kids picked to be 100% remote. Never did we imagine that we would have 25% of our parents and students choosing to go 100% remote. So what we did is we actually built a remote academy at the elementary level. We took 21 of our existing elementary teachers and made them permanently remote teachers. We took an assistant principal at the junior high, made them a remote principal. We built a whole remote academy within a 2-week frame once we received all the data. So we're taking a lot of different approaches. So we're actually running a hybrid model and a remote model at the same time. So what does it look like for Auburn? So similar to Port Byron, our teachers came in 3 days last week for staff development and training. And we also did 2 more days of it this week with a twist on Tuesday and Wednesday. We had a meet and greet for our students to come and meet their teachers. We did it in small groups, small classrooms at different times so we could spread out throughout the entire 2 days. Kids picked up their Chromebooks, they picked up their materials, they got a chance to meet their teachers. Some cases they got to walk down to their classrooms. But also on Tuesday, we did start up some programs. On Tuesday, all of our children that were going to BOCES for CTE and special ed programs started on Tuesday with that, as well as the BOCES 8-1 classrooms that are housed in our district at Owasco Elementary, Herman and Casey Park. Those started on Tuesday as well. Today, we had another part of our phase in where all of our own 12-1 and 8-1 children started this morning. I was in the buildings this morning doing a walkthrough. It's phenomenal having kids back in the building. Even though it's a small group and we're building up to the big group coming in, it is great just to see children and our staff back in the building. So that is at the high school, Seward Elementary, and Auburn Junior High. So right now we have students in all of our buildings except for Genesee Elementary School. And then our next phase will be on September 28th. And September 28th, we will have our kindergarten, first and second grade students coming in, our 7th grade at the junior high, our 11th and 12th grade students at the high school, again, phasing in. You know, again, with Port Byron and their number of students, trying to get 4,000 kids back in all at once. We faced too many obstacles and we were worried about what could happen, because our main goal is once we're open, we don't plan on closing again. We want to continue to move forward. So we wanted to do this strategically. So we're going to start with K1, 2, 7, 11, and 12 on September 28th. Everybody else will stay remote. And then on October 13th, everyone will be back in, and that will be 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, 8th, 9th, and 10th will all come in, and then we will be in our full hybrid model. So we're in sort of a semi-hybrid model right now. But today, all of our children are learning remotely. As I was walking through Seward, teachers were already getting online with their students and setting up small group instruction, big class instruction. The high school, the teachers the kids are online right now, sort of doing what Mr. O'Brien said, but they're doing it in their homes instead of in their classrooms. So they're pretty much following their schedule as well. You know, we're a very fortunate school district. We have so many great things. Two things that we lack is money and space. So we don't have space in our buildings to be able to split our classes in half and put them in we don't have empty classrooms. We could use the gymnasium, we could use the cafeteria, we could use the library, maybe 4 or 5 classrooms. But when you have 24 sections in a building, we don't have enough space to bring all of our children back into those buildings, nor do we have the number of staff members to be able to split them up. You know, people have come up with some great ideas about, you know, St. Joe's is closed down, and that's great. We could move half of our kids from a building into another complete building, but we don't have the staff numbers to go over there to be able to teach 2 classes. I would have to double my number of teachers at the elementary level. So, you know, those are some of the issues that we face. And Neil said, you know, with declining enrollment, he is fortunate enough to be able to use more space in his buildings. We really haven't had a declining enrollment in the last 5 or 6 years. We've been around 4,200 students strong since I've been superintendent since 2015. So, you know, our enrollment's not going down. At the high school, at the elementary schools, we can get about 10 or 11 desks in a classroom. There might be, for some instances, we can get 12. At the high school, we can get anywhere between 13 and 15, maybe 16 in a classroom. The problem is at our high school, our class sizes are anywhere from 24 to 32 students in a classroom. So again, we could only bring half of our students back. And same thing at the elementary, our class sizes are usually anywhere between 20 and 28 in our elementary, but we do have some that are doing remote. So the total remote is bringing our numbers down to about 20, which again, we can still only bring in about 10 kids, 11, maybe 12 in a classroom a day. But the other issue that we face, and Neil, like Neil said, we also have parents that are going to transport their children, thank goodness, and we appreciate that, and we thank them because we can only put 22 children on a 66 passenger bus. And that's only if we transport between 24 and 2,500 students a day. So being able to only transport a third of them a day is a real obstacle. And, you know, like Neil said, our main goal is to get every child into school 5 days a week. You know, what we do is we're taking that approach where we're being very cautious in how we do it. We get through our first phase, and now we've got our special education students in. We're going to monitor that for 2 weeks. Then we're going to bring our next group. What my hope is that the community is going to see that we can do it safely and that we can do it right, so that they're more apt to bring their kids back into school and put them at least into our hybrid model so we can get the children back into school. But even in our hybrid model, it's only 2 days of in-school days. So they're only going to be in school 2 days a week. They're still going to be remote 3 days a week, which means our remote program has to be fantastic. And by us starting K through 12 full remote, it's giving us a couple of weeks, and in some instances for some of our other grade levels, 4 weeks of that training, because just like Mr. O'Brien said, at any time we know that something could happen during flu season where we could get shut down again. We're not going to skip a beat because we're going to be knowing what our remote learning is, and our kids are going to be doing it. So if that does happen, we will be prepared for that. When I started as superintendent in 2015, one of my ultimate goals was to become a one-to-one initiative, have a one-to-one initiative for our school district too, so that every student would have a device. And this was actually going to be our first year that we were fully a one-to-one school district. So every child does have access to a Chromebook in Auburn as well. So we made that move. And again, we had to jump into it a little bit quicker. Neil had been doing it for a few years. We jumped in it on March 13th when we had to hand out these Chromebooks and just start right up from scratch. But, you know, we've done a lot of professional development. We're still moving forward with it. Again, this was not the start of the year that we're familiar with. You know, there was something missing on the first day of school, and it was the students. And, you know, as Neil said, it's sort of been exciting for him. I have the complete opposite take on it. You know, when I went into administration, nobody said, how are you going to deal with COVID when it hits you? Because I think I would have left that classroom because we're about children. We're about having kids in school. You know, I want our kids back in school, and our teachers want kids back in school. You know, funny thing, like Neil said, all of his staff is there. Well, let me tell you, we have 400 teachers, and I have all my teachers back except for 2. And those 2 teachers are doing complete remote for the remote learners. So all of our staff is back as well. But that shows you that our staff wants to be with children. And, you know, again, that's why we're doing it the way we are, to show our staff members and our students and our families that we're doing it in a safe way by bringing small groups in it at a time. But, you know, again, we're really looking forward to getting all of our kids in. And I have a district parent council meeting on Monday, the 14th, which again will be done before this is seen. But I'm inviting families in because what my goal is I want to continue to build in our phase in and build in a phase 4 and 5. And when we get to phase 5, that means all of our kids are back into school 5 days a week. Some of the barriers with that, again, is, you know, we still have to follow the guidelines set by the governor. And unfortunately, those guidelines that he has prevents a school district like Auburn to be able to bring all of our kids back 5 days because of limitation of space, limitation of transportation, limitation of resources and staff members. So we're going to need some things to happen from the state, like social distancing guidelines and transportation guidelines. But we've got to be ready to phase in to get all of our children back in. And that's what we're going to start planning on next week with our community.
Thank you. So for the remaining 20, 25 minutes, a couple of questions. Maybe if we can just go back and forth, chime in if you want to. You both hit a number of things, but some items that have come up in passing. Cayuga County as a whole has a high poverty rate. One of the items that your schools have been known for have been free and reduced breakfasts and lunches. How are you handling that? I know in the case of Auburn, because I only happen to be on, I think I'm on Jeff Pirozzolo's direct dial number for some stuff. Thank you, by the way. I'm glad you're getting away from those 6 a.m. calls.
Yeah.
You were doing food baskets and food stuffs during the year, and I'm assuming Fort Barton was doing the same. I'm not on your list, but how are you dealing with free and reduced lunch? Because that's an important component of our school systems.
Yeah, so for us, because twofold, because we have most of our students here, we offer free breakfast and lunch for all of our students. We provided, oh my God, we were providing 3,500 meals in a rural community during the pandemic, providing 7 meals per child in the community back then. But now we're doing it more traditional because we have the students here. We do offer those who are doing online also to have meals. They have to pick them up though.
Okay.
So those back and forth. But as Jeff would say too, that's one of the reasons why we want our kids back, because when we took a look at our kids as a whole and our families, for all the reasons you would articulate, they have to be with us. You know, we have to feed them. Some of our counselors are their counselors, and when they're not here, they struggle socially, emotionally. And last but not least, even when we do online learning, and we have 180 students right now with online learning, is at the end of the day, a lot of our parents struggle to facilitate learning inside the household. It is not something they find easy. Some of the material is not something they acquired a great skill of. And so that's the other struggle that Jeff and I are both worried about, is a lost year. You know, we can pipe in lessons all day long, but it's that interaction that we're trying to reach at. He has his teachers there trying to do it now. And that's what we're searching, is some ways when we have students at home, how can we create a learning environment there where they'll grow? Because many kids can't just watch a lesson on a computer screen and glean the important skills and content they need to be successful. They need guidance, they need feedback, they need the opportunity to be asked questions. We need a little motivation. One of the things we noticed last spring is that our statistics started to drop off as the weather got warmer. And students' habits of getting up in the morning were not the greatest in the world. And mornings started to become afternoon. And so that's one of the struggles we're having right now, is to make sure we recalibrate that we're not just feeding them, but we're also playing the parent role of getting them up in the morning, they're home online. And that, you know, poking them from a distance.
So just on that particular question, just for a quick second, I'll come back to the Auburn district in a second. What about how, not restrictive, or how much adherence are you dealing with the issue of attendance? You know, I don't want to use the old Little Rascals theory of truancy, but how do you deal with making sure that students are online?
We're getting hyper aggressive, because that was one of the takeaways from last spring. We had a great spring, but when we took a look at our data, we were starting to lose kids. So we have computer programs that actually will test if they're actually online by 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30. And so if, minimum standard is they're online. We also have a computer program that will tell you how much duration they're working on any app or any activity on there. And so if they don't turn on their computer by 9:30 in the morning, their parents get a phone call that they're not learning yet today. And if they are not engaged by 1 o'clock, the parents get another phone call. And if they don't engage by 1 o'clock, we call them absent for the day. And so we're trying very hard. We started online learning Tuesday, and I'll be honest with you, we're poking them. We're pushing and shoving, because like a good classroom, you start your good classroom management on day one. And so if we don't start off rocking and rolling with high expectations, if we started off soft, especially with this beautiful weather out right now, and students coming off of 4 or 5 months of dormant time, we would be creating a nightmare scenario when we want to get serious if we tried 3 or 4 weeks down the road. So we came in with a hyper aggressive mode. We have a special e-news for online learners. We're using robocalling with the online learners. We're creating like a separate school within the school. The kids are at home. And one of the sole purposes is to poke them enough to make sure that, at least in the beginning, that they're following the positive routines of a student. And then the next level is to see how well they're doing learning and so forth. But right now, it's really more getting systems in place that they're getting up in the morning and they're engaging with the teachers and so forth. The attendance being taken when a teacher does have a small group of students that are working online, again, for the sole purpose of, hey, are you online? Are you active? Are you being a student? Are you learning?
Mr. Pirozzolo, on those two issues of both attendance and the issue of feeding students, because you are remote right now.
So again, I'll go back to, we've been dealing with the issue of breakfast and lunch since March 13th. We've served over 400,000 meals through our school districts and through a lot of our food giveaways. As you know, we still continue. Now we've moved every Friday. We do our 300 boxes of meat and 300 boxes of produce, and we do the giveaway at the high school. We're continuing to do that. We have the food shelter place in Syracuse, where we get all of our boxes for our homeless families that we continue to deliver every Friday. But we also, we did a summer feeding program at Genesee Elementary School, and that program didn't only feed students, it fed family members as well. So we have had a constant supply of breakfast and lunch for our children since March 13th. We will continue to do that. We're going to be opened up at Genesee Elementary School, Casey Park Elementary School, and the junior high, where the children can come, and they are currently right now, they pick up their breakfast and their lunch We do it on Monday and Wednesday, so they give them multiple breakfasts, multiple lunches. The special education kids that are in school, they're here 4 days a week, so we can feed them. On Thursday, they take a breakfast and lunch home with them on Fridays. That's what we'll be doing when we go to the hybrid model. So when we're in the hybrid model, the kids will get their lunches and extra breakfast when they leave for the next day, because we'll be on an A-B. So our A students come on Monday, Wednesday, our Bs are on Tuesday and Thursday. So when they leave, they'll take a breakfast and lunch for that next day until they come back to school. So, you know, we're continuing to feed our children. We're continuing to do food giveaways to help the community and families. We're continuing to do our deliveries for our homeless children. And that's something that we'll continue to do. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot. It'd be a lot easier if kids were in school every day just to feed them that way. And our kids, we're doing free lunches for all and breakfast for all of our children in the district this year. We've been only usually doing it for the elementary, but we're doing it for the junior and the high school as well this year.
I want to get to money issues in a moment, but two other items that you quickly talked about, or I know are issues in your district. And one is, and I know Superintendent Pirozzolo, you had talked about the Chromebooks and having students have those. There's a digital divide in our community. We've talked about that. Wednesday Morning Roundtable has talked about this in the past. It's the digital divide of not having the hardware. So we know where Auburn is on that. Where is Port Barn on the idea, if you have to go remote, will all of your students have the technology, not the internet, but the technology to work remotely?
Yeah, so again, because of the big lead time, so we were able to do that last March. Every student, including UPK, had a device. It's going to be the question that we struggle with a little bit, probably more than Jeff, because the nature of our community is on the internet issues. But the actual devices themselves, we were one-on-one last spring, and that was one of the positives of being able to get ready to go out.
So the other half of that dilemma is they have the equipment, but they are not users of Spectrum or Verizon Fios or some other costly system. How do you get them with hotspots? I think I've heard that Auburn has created several hotspots, which is very costly. I heard a number yesterday, $80,000. I'm not sure. I say this because I know in rural areas in Cayuga County, because I'm also working on the complete count for the census, which you were both very supportive of, and we appreciate it. We're not getting people to respond because they don't have the hardware, but more importantly, they don't have access to online. So how are you dealing with the issue of making sure they have Wi-Fi?
So last spring, we actually rolled out school buses, because all of our school buses have Wi-Fi. We put it in the driveways. Again, we were doing everything on the fly. This summer, when we did our strategic planning, taking a look at what worked and didn't work, that's not a sustainable model forever. And so we went out through the BOCES and the RIC and got 100 Verizon cards, hotspot cards. And we're waiting on delivery on about 20 AT&T cards. And so that's what we're doing now. I'll be honest with you, it still doesn't answer all the questions, because there's some rural areas where Verizon and AT&T both are not good. And, you know, that's the big struggle out there. There are some pockets out there where it doesn't matter. There's not a broadband signal for them to receive.
How about for Auburn?
Yeah, you know, and Neil deals with more of the rural areas. We have pockets of that, but ours is mostly the poverty. We've purchased 700 hotspots. Again, it's the cost. And again, especially when the governor's taking 20% of our aid away from us. So, you know, here we're going to be expected to lose 20% of aid, which in Auburn, if it's all aid, it's about $9.5 million. But we're also going to be spending over $1 million extra in COVID related cost. So, you know, that's one of the barriers. We will not deprive any child of a hotspot that needs it. We will make sure that they have it. But again, some of those rural areas, even the hotspots don't work that well there. So, you know, there's many issues that we face, and you know, but we will make sure that our kids have devices and they will have hotspots.
So, Mr. O'Brien, do you mind raising your left hand? You have a band there. I don't know, Mr. Pirozzolo, you have a band one way or the other. I know I have a college band. So this is what I'm talking about is the ever-changing landscape. So for SUNY, about 5 days ago, the governor's people are now saying that you're going to do mouth swabs or some type of swab testing in school. What are you going to do in testing? And this then does go into the budget issue. You just mentioned, Mr. Pirozzolo, $1 million in extra COVID costs. Where are you on testing, and that's an unfunded mandate likely, but more importantly, are you going to have to do swabs? And I can only imagine doing a swab on a kindergarten child. So how are you going to deal with that issue if that's a mandate from Albany, since they've now mandated that for SUNY campuses?
Well, first of all, we're already dealing with it on one level. We don't test. So far, even the executive order of yesterday reiterates schools are not required to test. But with this governor, every day is a new day. So I don't trust that's going to go on forward. I will tell you that the way the regulations are written now are so unfriendly for us to continue education long term. And one of the reasons is that any child who leaves school or does not come to school who has any one of the many symptoms of COVID-19 has to be tested. And so I've already had one angry parent, a child who has allergies, who was sneezing, his nose was all runny and so forth, had to leave school. And now in order to re-enter school, he has to be tested. He also is a severely autistic child who struggles mightily with almost anything. So using a nose test right now will likely cause him to hit the doctor. I mean, it's very difficult. He's a very big boy. He's an older gentleman and so forth. I feel terrible for the parent. He has allergies. We know he has allergies, but there is no discretion whatsoever. You, Guy, you're at the college. My wife's a college professor too. When they fill out their app in the morning, you have to have 2 or more of the things on the list in order to be considered to be somewhat at risk for COVID-19. Schools, it's 1. And so they set a standard that's ridiculously low because I have kids. Kids have maladies all the time. Kids have runny noses. Kids have fevers. Kids throw up because lunch didn't agree with them. Any one of those will trigger them into a testing protocol. And so superintendents and school boards and everybody, teachers have been arguing regulation are overly onerous and unworkable into the future, but very politically palatable to the person who's there right now.
So let me ask you that before, and I'll start with Mr. Pirozzolo on this one. This kind of dovetails with this. We're hopefully going to get a vaccine. We don't know what that is. Hopefully we rely on Dr. Fauci and the CDC to do the right thing. We're going to get into whether it's January or February, being realistic, where you're going to have people get the vaccine, and whether you talk about herd immunity or whatnot. What are you going to do with students who don't, or their parents who don't want to be vaccinated? And I know flu is a minimum threshold, and that's always a challenge. What are you going to do? Does the district or the state going to have a policy? It would be easier if Albany had a policy. One of the few ways you would love them to do it, so it's uniform, about vaccinations.
And that's a great question. It's too bad that there's a pause right now because somebody in the UK has come down with some type of adverse effect, and they don't know if it's related to the new vaccine or not. But hopefully that pause will get underway quickly so they can continue to move forward. That's one of the questions that we talk about all the time because, again, many families, many parents are going to choose not to give their child the vaccine because it's brand new. Nobody knows long-term effects. They're rushing for this vaccine, and they know that it's a priority and it needs to be done. But there's a lot of people in Auburn right here that do not want to have their kids vaccinated with any shot. So Governor Cuomo came out with a new law. So last year, all the children that came to school had to be vaccinated. Last summer we had about 120 students that had not been vaccinated. So, it was a lot of communication going back and forth with the parents to get the kids vaccinated, or they had to be homeschooled. So now you're coming up with a vaccine for the coronavirus. And what are parents going to choose? Is Governor Cuomo going to come out and say, well, if you don't have the coronavirus vaccine, you can't go back to school? Or is he going to say, it's at your own risk now? we really don't know what's going to happen with that.
Would you rather have the governor make that decision versus a patchwork of 700 and I don't know how many districts are 780?
Absolutely. He hasn't made one decision for schools yet. He puts us all out on an island when it comes to anything. So I don't think he will make that determination. I think he'll consider it like the flu shot instead of the measles or whatever.
So a flu shot is not mandated for any of your students. Am I correct on that?
No.
Measles and other things.
Yes,
not flu
but
shot.
the flu shot is not. So again, it depends on what it does for him and how far he can go with that. But I do not think that he's going to make a determination on you have to come in school. I think that is going to be left up to school districts to figure out how we're going to deal with that.
Mr. O'Brien, you look like you're chomping at the bit.
I think at the end of the day, immunizations always come from Albany. I think the critical thing, it goes back to all the questions get woven in together, and that is money. So there are parents who out there who think that there's a new school district called the Mark Byron Online School that will go for the next 50 years. Online learning is only because of the virus. And so the critical moment for the governor, and money's going to play a role because we can't afford the school we have right now based on the resources of the state and local government. And sure as heck going into the future, if there was immunization in January and you said, hey, let's all go back to normal, sports, musicals, dances, life's going to be great. I can't afford to also keep a second school open called the online school at the same time. So I think the governor at the end of the day does have tremendous power. It's going to be the New York State Department of Health. They're the ones who require immunization. And the big question is, are you going to take out that online version? Then parents have the difficult decision that Jeff was referring to last year. I had the same thing, hey, either you homeschool your child or they get immunized. And most parents don't want to homeschool when they're on the hook to do the entire education. And that is an incredible pressure point to get immunized. I'm not saying I don't know what's going to occur, but that's the magic question for Albany. Are you going to put pressure on parents to immunize, or are you going to try to keep all these systems in place? But to be honest with you, there's not the resources to go forward long-term with this offering and have the same old comprehensive school system at the same time.
So with that in mind, let's leave the last 7-8 minutes about money. As they always say, Bomber's Law is it's always about the money. So you have two issues right now beyond COVID. You have a state that reported this week that started the fiscal year off with a $14.5 billion with a B dollar deficit, hoping that they're going to get some money sometime today. The Senate might vote on a stimulus bill in Washington. We know that is likely not to go anywhere. At some point, there's going to be a trickle down beyond the 20%. You're also faced with a tax cap. So even if your voters wanted to go out, they could. They have to do a supermajority. How are you going to budget? I mean, I'm assuming you've already, Jeff Pirozzolo, you just said 20% cut. There's a theory that might be more or somewhere around that for the year. Does that mean layoffs? Does that mean changing what you're doing financially for either of you?
And one good thing, and Neil is great with his money, and he really stays in tune with this. For us, again, we are going to have hopefully a good rollover from last year, just because we worked with different vendors to save money last year when March 13th hit. Our issue is, again, we were looking at 20% foundation aid. That's what our projection was on. When we found out, and we've been looking, that it's going to be all aid, that's going to have a critical impact on us. And I spoke with the community, when we were talking about going out for our budget, and we talked about cutting 10% of our budget, 20% of our budget. We as a school district decided to go with the numbers that Cuomo gave us, and we didn't make any cuts, but we were very transparent with the community and said this does not mean that there will not be mid-year cuts. But again, Guy, like Neil was saying, how do you make mid-year cuts when you're running two programs simultaneously running in the same area where we've got hybrid kids coming in every other day, and then we've got 1,000 kids online. It's more staff that it takes to do these type of programs. So if we do look at cutting in December, where do we go and where do we cut? And I mean, I think many school districts in New York State are going to really, really suffer, and some are going to say that they're going to have to shut their doors.
So, Mr. O'Neill, Mr. O'Brien, before I let you chime in on this, because I know you have some, I'd like to also put a little twist on this. With COVID-19, is this the opportunity? Maybe there is a positive here. No, don't let any good crisis go to waste. Is this a way to reform the way we fund schools, how we operate schools? And does Albany have the will to help you do that?
Well, I was going to answer it in a way too. So I am gravely concerned about Cayuga County, gravely concerned on a variety of levels. First of all, our deficit in New York State is different than Florida's deficit because we have a structural deficit. And so, you know, I liken it to homeowners. Florida, they blew the roof off the house. If somebody gave money to put the roof back on, they're back to normal. Before the virus ever hit, we had a deficit. We have a structural deficit. That means the virus isn't the cause of our deficit. It made it much worse, but we have a problem at the state level. We do not have the resources to go forward. And so why I'm concerned about Cayuga County is that almost all the solutions for the state that are on the expense side have an incredibly adverse impact on Cayuga County because we are very dependent on public employment. And many of those public employment salaries come from a disproportionate amount that comes from downstate. And so when you look at cutting or when you look at being creative and saying, hey, why don't we combine Fort Byron and Weedsport School District and become more highly efficient, whatever dividend check comes from that will most likely head back downstate. In the meantime, the payrolls of Cayuga County will be diminished. And so I always use the example, just take two districts like us. If you combine the two of us, one of the two Nino's pizzerias, we both have one, will close. One of the Dollar Generals in both communities will close because you will be greatly reducing payrolls. And so that's the problem here is that in the absence of having some private sector resurgence in upstate New York, that in the end of the day, when everybody says, hey, take advantage of this crisis, let's combine schools, close a few more prisons. They're all cost-efficient ways. Maybe we close the Auburn prison and build a brand new spanking one somewhere else in the state that's high energy efficient and much cheaper to operate. But all those things will have adverse impact in this county, especially since we're so dependent on public payrolls. So, you know, I'm very concerned about the structural deficit because the governor is very quiet about the deficit he had before the virus. He's very robust in talking about Trump's deficit and how the federal government has made this a horrific situation. I don't want to be political, but he never wants to talk about the fact that we had $8 billion deficit before the first virus outbreak in the state. And we never dealt with that in the budget. We never closed the original structural deficit. And that's why the numbers are astronomical. But again, Jeff, we're about 70% state aidable, 65, and I'm about the same. You're talking about two school districts that generally get our resources from downstate. Generally, that's how the taxes are done in New York State. And so when you're talking about combining or doing something special, you're talking about much less money coming from downstate to upstate. And it's just a grave concern I have going forward that the payrolls in Cayuga County, we've had a declining population for 3 decades, and we had a declining workforce for 3 decades. And I worry that it will just accelerate that as we go forward without some meaningful change in how we do business.
I want to end with either a point of optimism or dread. I'll let you each, and you keep it to 30 seconds or something of that nature. What are you either optimistic about, or besides a call from Kathleen Cuddy, the public health director, who we all love dearly, but nobody wants to get a call from her. What is your biggest worry or you have optimism about right now?
Hey, Jeff, I'll jump in because I just did the dread, so I'll do the optimism.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I did the dread. That's my gravest concern is long-term viability of the county with all this. But the positive is, I got to tell you, it has brought the community together. You know, I sat there Tuesday outside when we had the 50-minute drop-off, and I expected an angry parent to, you know, yell at me and so forth as they sat in this long line to drop their child off. I got to tell you, since March, the community has really come together in a way that was just been remarkable. People's spirits are very high. There's a general desire to come together like I've never seen before. So I think that's the part that has heartened me, bring more positive, is that as a community, we're better today than we were a year ago. And there's a sense of coming together to try to solve some of the problems, which, you know, it brings me hope that maybe beyond here, we will find some of the solutions to some of the more deeper, longer term problems too.
Thank you. Mr. Pirozzolo, threat or optimism?
Guy, I get yelled at every day.
By your wife.
There's a whole list of people we know on that one.
You know, and again, when you're talking about size, it's just different. It's just different. Many of the small city school districts, you know, which we belong to the small city school district organization. I'm actually the president of. We're all in a hybrid model at some point just because our number of students. So, you know, there's a lot of frustration out there, and I get it. And I agree with him. I hate the hybrid model. I hate the remote model. I want all children back to school. My optimism is that something is going to happen by hopefully January week, where we have the opportunity to bring all of our children back to school every day, 5 days a week. Do I have a lot of dreads? I do. But again, you've got to continue to look at the optimistic piece of it. We have a great community here, and we have a lot of support. You know, we just have to follow the guidelines and do the best we can. But I'm very optimistic that we will be back 100% at some point this year.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time over the last hour, for kicking off our Wednesday morning roundtable. We wish you luck and health in your districts and for yourselves. You have one of the hardest jobs, there's no question about that, of anybody right now, and you're getting it from all sides. So we appreciate you kicking off the Wednesday morning roundtable for 2021 with us. We will be back next month with, as we have done most years over the last 11, with a candidates forum. We'll have candidates for the 126th Assembly District. That's a district that is, for the first time in almost 20 years, having an open seat. Assemblyman Gary D. Finch has decided to retire, and we will hopefully have Democrat Dia Carvajal and Republican John Lamatis in to do a forum here. We'll be back also following that with a discussion about the court system and what's going on in that area. And then hopefully by January, it will break that we'll be back at our new home, Westminster Presbyterian Church on the Loop Road. We're going to be hopefully having our events live there. And I know Robert will give you some details about how you can participate beyond just that. We again want to thank Tompkins Trust for their support as our corporate sponsor. And I'd be remiss as we start this new year off without saying two sets of thank yous. One is to Stephanie DeVito in the Downtown BID, who have taken over the administration of the Wednesday morning roundtable. Jessie Klein is always working. She's been working with us for 11 years now. But the BID has taken over as our home. And we should also say thank you to Chris Nusarina and Amy Wallner of the YMCA, who for 4 or 5 years processed the payments and process coordination for this. We could not have had WMR, the Wednesday morning roundtable, survive without the YMCA's continued support. And so we want to thank that. If you have ideas about topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like to have, I just want to say you can contact Jessie Klein or Robert. We do have a coordinating council that includes Laura Coburn, Stephanie DeVito, Stephanie Hutchinson, Susan Martini, Meg O'Connell, Robert, Ed Cato, Tom Minicucci, Chris Nusarino, and myself. We'd love to hear what you are thinking. You can go to the BID website, and that can give you some information on how to contact all of us. We will see you next month with the candidates for the 126th Assembly District, we hope. We hope you stay safe and well, and I'll turn it back over to Robert. Thank you for coordinating this for us.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. It was great information. Really appreciate your time. And I just want to thank everyone else for joining us for this PID program brought to you by Tompkins Trust Company. To join the roundtable, please visit auburndowntown.org and click on WMR. As Guy said, next month's video program this video will premiere on October 21st for next month and feature the forum with New York State Assembly 126th District candidates. Thank you once again for joining us, and we hope that you safe, and have a great day.